The universe, as one version of Norse myth tells us, was carved from the remains of the primordial giant Ymir. His bones formed the mountains, his flesh the earth, his skull the sky, and his blood the sea. In a similar, albeit less physically literal way, the world of Hellblade Senua's sacrifice is built out of bits and pieces of Senua. Not her flesh and blood, as in Ymir's case, but her thoughts, memories, and emotions.
The singular path forward is forged from Senua's own indomitable will. The obstacles along that path are the ghosts of Senua's past made manifest, things she must come to terms with in order to move on. Many of the puzzle mechanics are illustrations of the splintered and psychotic way that Senua perceives the world, and the only voiced characters other than Senua are already dead. These ghostly FMVs are only the versions of them that linger on inside of her mind. Senua is not just the main character or the protagonist. She is not merely the centerpiece of Hellblade. She is the only character, and Hellblade only exists in order to explore who Senua is. It is only her anguish, her grief, her self-doubt, and her determination that is so powerfully and spectacularly written in the digital ink of character design and performance capture.
Hello. Who are you? Doesn't matter. Welcome. You're safe with me. I'll be right here, nice and close so I can speak without alerting the others. Let me tell you about Senua. Her story has already come to an end, but now it begins anew.
Senua is a Celt, or more specifically a Pict from the Orkney Islands, with the checked clothing, blue paint, and hilt construction to prove it. Those last two things could be criticized as Iron Age affectations utterly out of place in the 9th century when this story takes place, but they do succeed in making clear to the audience that Senua is far from home. Senua is Celtic, and so are the people who haunt her memories, but that is where it ends. We are not in a Celtic land. After she came back from exile to find her village destroyed and her lover Dilian blood-eagled, Senua took the most seaworthy vessel she could find in Scapa and set off across the North Sea. Her goal, the source of her unending determination, is to recover Dilian's soul from the cold, dark place that is Norse hell. As such, Hellblade does not deal with Celtic mythology at all. Instead, it explores the supernatural world of the Norse from an outsider's perspective. That is certainly not new ground to tread, but unlike many of our familiar, popular depictions, Hellblade does not shy away from showing us these gods as the strangers they really are. When we do catch a glimpse of their true nature through the fog of a history written by Christians and Muslims, it is not pleasant to behold. They are, it must be remembered, dark gods for a dark time, blood-feuding, shape-shifting, untrustworthy gods, gods of totemic worship, of needless war, and of human sacrifice. Above all, they are strange, weird, and unfamiliar, and Hellblade's ominously novel approach to their design confronts us with that reality. Fenrir is definitely a dog, but only in the sense that Adam Smasher is a man. Hela is depicted exactly as the sagas describe, half living flesh and half dead blackness, but here, crawling out of the murk, her face like that of a creepy doll that got caught in a house fire, she takes on a newly terrifying aspect. Interestingly, she does not really attack until Senua does.
Pick up the sword. Pick it up. Fight the darkness. Fight it. Get up. Get up. Get up and fight.
More generally, though, the environments of Hellblade are dark and sinister. They are full of blood, wood, mud and murk. We do not belong here, and these places feel, as they should to both us and Senua, unfamiliar, unsettling, and uninviting. Senua might be a stranger in this land, but she still has to play by its rules. Arguably, the moment that the Vikings killed Dillion, they turned her into one of the grieving, vengeful Valkyries from their own sagas. Like Brunhild following Sigurd to Hel, she will not take no for an answer. But in another sense, Senua is also Sigurd. She is the hero who retrieves a magic sword and proves herself in feats of arms. But either way, with words or with the blade, she must cut her way through those who would oppose her. Fortunately, she trained with Dillion to become a capable warrior, and it shows. Hellblade's combat feels weighty, fluid, and visceral, and it exists primarily for a narrative purpose, to illustrate Senua's competence, strength, and resolve. There are also genuine stakes involved. Too many failures result in the loss of all progress. Or at least that is what Hellblade would have you believe. This is actually a bluff, and there is no limit to the number of times you can respawn at a checkpoint. Deaths do cause the darkness to spread up Senua's sword arm, but only up to a limit that is gradually raised as the story goes on. I am actually quite curious how this fared in playtesting, and if there ever was a version of the game where too many deaths actually did wipe your save. During my playthrough, I had no idea this was a bluff, although doubt did begin to creep in after I died a ludicrous amount of times during the very annoying fight with Fenrir, in which neither hearing nor vision can be relied upon as tells for his attacks. Fortunately, that seems to be the only boss that spent too long in the oven. Regardless, the mere suggestion of permadeath raises the stakes and draws you into the same anxiety, the same vacillation between hope and hopelessness that Senua is experiencing. My only real reservation about this lack of a system is the amount of text needed to explain it in a game that is meant to have no user interface. Hellblade has no button prompts, no health bars, and no tutorial, although the pause menu is always there to answer any specific questions. In order to time a parry or to see which enemies are on their last legs, you actually have to look at them, at their weapons, at their posture, and at the wounds they have suffered. And that is true outside of combat as well. When it's time for the player to press a button, the voices in Senua's head encourage her to take a diegetic action, to focus on one of Druth's lore stones, or to climb a ladder. In order for the user to interface with this absolutely spectacular game, they actually have to look at it. Look and listen, because, as those binaural voices demonstrate, the soundscape has been crafted with just as much care.
Another voice joins us. She once tried to make them go away. Pretend they weren't real. But what good is that? We are always here.
It is past time, however, that I offered a disclaimer. I have played this game, watched A Beautiful Mind, and read the Wikipedia article for Psychosis, but otherwise I have no experience or expertise in the subject. None whatsoever. I am thoroughly and completely the wrong person to be offering any sort of commentary on Senua's hallucinations and delusions.
But that is exactly the point. Video games allow us to walk miles in other people's moccasins, to gain empathy for experiences that we ourselves will never experience. Senua's reality is just as real to us as it is to her. We see and hear the same things that she does, which means that we too have to navigate the tangled web of reality and unreality that faces her.
Senua sees patterns in the world that may or may not exist. Her reality can be bright, vivid, and overexposed, or dull, murky, and colorless. Sometimes it shatters into kaleidoscopic pieces, and she must find the right perspective from which they can be made to fall back into place. And the player sees all of this too. It is all a part of our and Senua's reality, whether it is real or not. There is a reason that Paul Fletcher, professor of health neuroscience at Cambridge, is listed first in the opening credits. It is with his guidance, and with input from many other experts and people who have actually experienced psychosis, that Hellblade is able to present this wide array of psychotic symptoms for those of us with no experience to experience, if you see what I mean. There is, in my view, no better way to build empathy and soften ignorance. But it would be wrong to view Hellblade only through that lens. Psychosis is both a part of Senua's story and a means through which that story is told, but it does not define her. Rather, it interlocks with her traumatic story of grief and the historical and mythological context. None of those elements can be disentangled from the others, and they come together to form a uniquely introspective story, a deeply immersive, one-take soliloquy of a game.
Come, child, take my hand. Come, Senua.
I am leaving!
You cannot escape the darkness. Your curse will make everyone suffer. You will have blood on your hands!
In order to claim the legendary sword Graham, Senua must prove herself, or perhaps convince herself that she is worthy. This involves venturing into 4 different dark caves to confront a past that is full of guilt, shame, and social ostracism. Even her own father despises her because of what is referred to as her curse. Dillion is always the light at the end of the tunnel, the only one willing to empathize rather than ostracize.
When it comes for me, I have no power over it.
But here, for the first time, someone was there to help.
But I heard your voice. You brought me back.
You found your own way back. All you needed was a little help. A little hope.
Graham itself turns out to be pattern-welded, with a gilded and anachronistically long crossguard that reminds me of the alleged Sword of Charlemagne. Strangely, however, none of this seems to help in actual combat. This sword no longer breaks when used to fight gods in cutscenes, but in gameplay it doesn't actually feel any more powerful to use. It was around this time that I changed the difficulty from adaptive to easy, but not necessarily because the game was too hard, although Fenrir is absolutely a pain in the ass. The real reason was a narrative one. The sword Graham, according to legend, was sharp enough that if placed in the Rhine, it would slice through a piece of wool drifting with the current. A sword like that should take 2 or 3 hits to deal with a basic enemy, not 5 or 6, and certainly not the same number as Senua's original ordinary sword. Even if these details don't matter and the sword is just a symbolic manifestation of Senua's will, it still represents the fact that after facing her past, her will has been strengthened. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. The final encounter will keep spawning enemies until the frame rate drops to 10, if that's what it takes to bring Senua down. And that is the fate the Norns have woven. She is meant to fail, to have the darkness finally make its way to her head.
Never forget what it is like to see the world as a child, Senua. Every autumn leaf is like a work of art. Every rolling cloud a moving picture. Every day a new story. We too emerge from this magic, like a wave from the ocean, only to return to the sea.
The other way of looking at this is that part of Senua is meant to fail. It is time to let Dillion go, and the part of her that refuses to do that has to die along with him. Of course, that raises the question of whether any of this is real, if it is all just in her head, but I will happily leave that up for debate. I would rather focus on how fitting a way this is to bring an end to Senua's battle against Norse mythology. Much like Odin, she has sacrificed herself to herself.